Everyone told you Florida is flat. That's a lie. There are neighborhoods in Florida sitting nearly 400 feet above sea level, higher than most of downtown Atlanta. And the people living in those neighborhoods, they watch hurricane season coverage the same way you watch a scary movie, from a comfortable distance, knowing it can't actually get them. Today, we're exposing 11 Florida towns built on geological formations so old and so elevated that floodwater basically treats them like they don't exist. One of these towns has a flood risk score of 1 out of 10, the lowest rating possible, in a state where flood insurance costs are bankrupting families. Another town sits 235 feet above sea level and gets 65 inches of rain a year, more than almost anywhere in Florida, and still stays dry. There's a place down here named after Shakespeare's hometown, in a city where retirees are buying homes for under 200 grand specifically because they're done watching their furniture float. If you're the kind of person who actually reads the FEMA flood map before signing a mortgage, you're my people. Subscribe and let's get nerdy. Number 11, Chipley. Population 3,660. Median home price around $212,000. And honestly, most people have never heard of this place, which is exactly the point. Chipley sits in Washington County in the Florida Panhandle at roughly 100 to 118 feet above sea level. For context, Miami Beach sits at about 4 feet. So Chipley is looking down at South Florida the way a penthouse looks down at a parking garage. The town itself is quiet, small, the kind of place where people wave at you from their trucks and you have absolutely no idea who they are, but you wave back anyway, because that's just how it works here. The downtown has a dollar store, a few churches, and a Piggly Wiggly that functions as the unofficial town hall. Friday night high school football is treated with the same reverence most cities reserve for professional sports. If you want big city energy, Chipley is not your place. If you want a front porch and a yard that doesn't turn into a swimming pool every September, keep reading. Just outside town sits Falling Waters State Park, home to Florida's tallest waterfall. Yes, Florida has a waterfall. It drops 73 feet straight down into a cylindrical sinkhole. Most people hear Florida waterfall and assume someone is joking. They are not. The water literally plummets into a hole in the earth, and nobody knows exactly where it goes after that, which is either fascinating or terrifying depending on your relationship with sinkholes. The park itself sits at 239 feet elevation, further proof that this corner of the Panhandle has serious vertical range. Chipley's elevation keeps it well outside storm surge range, and the sandy soils drain rainfall efficiently. FEMA classifies most of the town as Zone X, meaning the federal government considers the flood risk minimal enough that insurance is not required. That alone saves homeowners hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars per year compared to coastal addresses. The trade-off? Chipley is not glamorous. There's no beachfront, no nightlife. The nearest major city is Panama City, about 45 minutes south. You're living here for peace, affordability, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing your living room will still be dry in October. Also, the Holmes Creek corridor nearby can spread tropical rainfall flooding beyond the waterways. So don't buy a house in a drainage valley and assume the town's reputation will protect you. Location within the town matters. Number 10, DeFuniak Springs. This one is genuinely special, and not just because of the elevation. DeFuniak Springs sits at 259 feet above sea level. The airport nearby clocks in at 289 feet. That makes this one of the highest towns in the entire state of Florida, and it's located just south of Britton Hill, which at 345 feet is the absolute highest natural point in all of Florida. Britton Hill also holds the distinction of being the lowest state high point in the entire United States, which is the most Florida fact imaginable. Even when Florida wins, it loses. When a hurricane rolls through the Panhandle, the storm surge stays at the coast, about 40 miles south, while DeFuniak Springs just gets some wind and rain. The town was built around Lake DeFuniak, which is one of only 2 nearly perfectly round spring-fed lakes in the entire world. The other one, Kingsley Lake, is also in Florida because apparently this state just collects geological oddities like baseball cards. The lake sits at a surface elevation of 226 feet, ringed by a Victorian-era historic district with homes and buildings dating back to the 1880s. Walking around the lake loop feels like stepping into a postcard from another century, except with more humidity and the occasional armadillo. DeFuniak Springs was originally a Chautauqua assembly town, which means it was founded as a community for adult education and cultural enrichment. The town still has a Chautauqua-era library and an annual festival celebrating that heritage. People come from all over the region for it. Median home price here runs around $227,000 to $238,000. FEMA maps put the elevated neighborhoods in Zone X, with flood-prone designations only near the lake shoreline and drainage channels. Population is just under 6,000, and the vibe is decidedly small-town southern. Spanish moss, front porches, and the kind of heat that makes iced tea feel like a constitutional right. The locals know they're sitting on high ground. And after Hurricane Michael ripped through the Panhandle in 2018, more people started figuring it out too. Number 9, Avon Park, named after Stratford-upon-Avon in England, because the British settler who founded it apparently thought Central Florida and Shakespeare's hometown had something in common. They do not, unless you count mosquitoes as a shared cultural experience. Avon Park sits at 135 feet above sea level in Highlands County, right on the Lake Wales Ridge. The town is home to Lake Verona, which holds a quietly impressive distinction. It's one of the deepest natural lakes in peninsular Florida, dropping about 80 feet below the surface. Think about that. You're in the flattest state in the country, standing next to a lake that's 8 stories deep. The ridge soils around it are ancient quartz sand deposited hundreds of thousands of years ago, and those sands are so porous that stormwater drains straight down instead of spreading across the surface. FEMA classifies Avon Park as Zone X, not in the 100-year floodplain. Flood insurance is not mandatory. The median home price is around $209,000, which makes it one of the most affordable towns on this list. Population is about 10,700. The town is the oldest incorporated community in Highlands County, and the pace of life here reflects that history. Nothing moves fast in Avon Park, including real estate transactions. The main drag through town features an unusually wide boulevard called the Mile-Long Mall, which is not actually a mall. It's a road, a really wide road. The name is misleading in the best possible way. The honest reality about Avon Park is that it's not a wealthy town. The poverty rate sits around 23%. The amenities are basic. You're not going to find artisanal coffee shops or boutique fitness studios here. What you will find is a home on high ground in a low-risk flood zone for under $200,000. And for a lot of people who just watched their 5th hurricane in 3 years eat their coastal investment, that math starts looking pretty compelling. If you're finding value in this, go ahead and tap that like button. It genuinely helps more people discover these hidden spots. Number 8. Keystone Heights. If you closed your eyes and someone drove you to Keystone Heights, you would bet money you were in North Georgia. The rolling hills, the longleaf pine forests, the cool winter mornings where you can actually see your breath. This does not look, feel, or behave like Florida. Keystone Heights sits on the Trail Ridge, an ancient barrier island and dune system that forms a bony spine running through north-central Florida. The city benchmark is about 95 feet above sea level, but the surrounding area averages around 141 feet, with spots climbing past 150 to 200 feet. The sandy soils here drain so fast that the seepage lakes, including 633-acre Lake Brooklyn, actually recharge the Floridan aquifer by percolating water straight down through the sand. You're not just living on dry ground. You're living on a natural water filtration system that's been doing its job since before humans existed on this continent. Population is tiny, just under 1,500 people. Median home value sits around $269,000. The town has over 20 lakes within easy reach, and the whole area feels like old Florida in the way people romanticize but rarely actually experience anymore. You'll find people fishing from docks at sunset, kids riding bikes without helmets, and a general vibe that suggests the year 2003 never ended. Now, the honest part. Keystone Heights is not immune to flooding. During Hurricane Irma in 2017, significant inland flooding hit Clay County, including neighborhoods in Keystone Heights that were not designated as high risk. This is important. FEMA Zone X means lower risk. It does not mean no risk. Nearly a third of all national flood insurance claims between 2014 and 2024 came from outside high-risk flood zones. Elevation helps enormously, but it's not a force field. That said, Keystone Heights remains one of the driest, most elevated communities in Northeast Florida. The sandhills drain fast, the ridge keeps storm surge far away, and the lifestyle feels about 50 years removed from the chaos of Jacksonville, which is only an hour's drive north. Number 7, Lake Placid. No, not the one in New York. And no, not the one from the movie with the giant crocodile. This Lake Placid is a tiny town of about 2,360 people in Highlands County, Florida, and its claim to fame is genuinely one of the strangest things on this entire list. Lake Placid grows roughly 95% of the entire world's caladium bulbs. Caladiums are those heart-shaped tropical plants with the red and white and pink patterns on the leaves. If you've ever seen one in a garden center, in a hotel lobby, in a restaurant planter, there's an overwhelming statistical probability that it came from this specific town in central Florida. 14 farms spread across about 1,200 acres produce nearly the entire global supply. The rich lake bottom muck soils along Lake Istokpoga's shores provide the perfect growing conditions, while the elevated ridge sands keep the town center well drained. The town sits at 98 feet above sea level on the southern end of the Lake Wales Ridge, surrounded by 27 lakes. Reader's Digest named it America's Most Interesting Town back in 2013, partly because of the caladiums and partly because the town has 47 painted murals on its buildings, and, for some reason, 17 painted trash cans to match. There's also a 240-foot observation tower that's been closed for years, just standing there, being tall and mysterious. Nobody seems to know when it's reopening. It just looms. Median home value runs around $242,000. The ridge geology keeps most of the town in FEMA Zone X, and the porous sand soils handle rainfall the way a sponge handles a drip from a leaky faucet. The water goes down, not sideways, which is exactly what you want when a tropical system dumps 10 inches overnight. Number 6, DeLand, known officially as the Athens of Florida, which is either charmingly ambitious or wildly delusional, depending on your expectations. Either way, DeLand earns its spot on this list through a combination of elevation, location, and the fact that it's home to Stetson University, the oldest private college in the state. DeLand sits at about 72 feet above sea level, with North DeLand climbing to 85 feet. That's lower than some other towns on this list, but the distance from the coast and the ridge formation beneath the town still keep most neighborhoods out of the high-risk flood zones. First Street Foundation rates the city's overall flood risk as minor, with about 11% of properties facing some measurable risk over a 30-year window. That's concentrated near the St. Johns River corridor, not the elevated downtown core. Median home prices land around $332,000 to $360,000, depending on which index you check. The downtown is walkable, the art scene is active, and the oak-lined streets look like they belong in a movie about a small southern college town where everyone has a secret. Population is about 37,000, making it the biggest town on this list by a significant margin. The vibe in DeLand is different from the ridge towns further south. There's actual stuff to do here. Restaurants, galleries, a thriving Main Street district, and the university brings a steady stream of cultural events and young energy that most inland Florida towns simply don't have. The town also has a skydiving scene that draws people from around the world, which is an odd thing to be famous for, but DeLand doesn't seem to care. FEMA classifies the elevated residential areas as Zone X. Insurance assessors in Volusia County confirm that homes away from river corridors get favorable ratings under FEMA's risk rating 2.0 system, which prices every address individually based on elevation and proximity to water. If your house sits on the ridge and not near the St. Johns, you're in good shape. Number 5, Sebring. The city on the circle sits at 98 feet above sea level in Highlands County, right on the spine of the Lake Wales Ridge. The downtown is literally built around a traffic circle called Circle Drive, and somehow this is both the most and least interesting thing about Sebring. The more interesting thing is the racing. Sebring is home to the 12 Hours of Sebring, one of the oldest endurance sports car races in North America. The race runs on a former World War II airfield, and every March, thousands of motorsport fans descend on this quiet retirement town to watch cars scream around a track at speeds that would make your insurance agent cry. For one weekend a year, Sebring becomes the loudest town in Florida. The other 51 weeks, you can hear a neighbor's screen door close from 2 blocks away. Median home price is around $225,000. Population hovers around 11,400. The town is predominantly retiree-friendly, with a pace of life that can charitably be described as deliberate. The early bird special isn't just a meal option here, it's a lifestyle philosophy. The ridge lakes around Sebring are geologically fascinating. Lake Tulane and others occupy sinkholes formed by the dissolution of ancient Eocene-era limestone underneath the quartz sand deposits. These lakes have been studied by paleoclimatologists because the sediment layers contain climate records going back tens of thousands of years. Your average Sebring retiree has no idea they're fishing on top of a geological research site, and that's probably fine. FEMA maps show mixed zones here. Lakefront parcels can fall into Zone AE, where flood insurance is required and the 1% annual flood chance applies. The higher ridge areas sit comfortably in Zone X. This matters if you're buying. 2 houses 3 blocks apart in Sebring can have completely different flood designations and insurance costs. Always pull the parcel-specific FEMA map. Always. If you're still watching, you're clearly serious about finding the right spot in Florida. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time we break down a state like this. Number 4, Ocala. This is the one that shows up on basically every safest Florida city from hurricanes list, and for good reason. Ocala sits at about 100 to 104 feet above sea level, roughly 60 miles from both the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic. That inland buffer is enormous. A Category 3 hurricane at the coast loses roughly half its intensity within 24 hours of landfall, according to research published in the journal Nature. By the time a major storm reaches Ocala, it's typically been downgraded to a tropical storm or lower. The wind still rattles your windows, but your house is not underwater. The city brands itself as the horse capital of the world, and the rolling green pastures of Marion County actually look the part. More than 1,200 horse farms operate in the area, and the limestone-enriched groundwater produces calcium-rich grasses that are supposedly ideal for building strong horse bones. Whether that's science or marketing is a debate for the equestrian community. What's not debatable is that the horse industry pumps over $1 billion annually into the local economy, making Ocala one of the few inland Florida towns with a genuinely diversified economic engine. Median home value is around $271,000. Marion County residents who carry NFEP flood insurance pay an average of just $590 per year, which is among the lowest averages in the entire state. Compare that to Charlotte County's risk-based average of over $3,400, or Monroe County in the Keys at nearly $4,700. The math is not subtle. The Weather Service has documented only about 37 significant flood events in the area since 1996, and most of those involved localized river corridor flooding along the Silver, Rainbow, or Ocklawaha rivers. The city itself, up on the elevation, stays dry. Ocala is also significantly more developed than the smaller towns on this list. You get hospitals, shopping, restaurants, and a real estate market with actual inventory. It's the closest thing on this countdown to a normal mid-sized city, which is exactly why it attracts so many coastal transplants running the math on insurance versus elevation. Number 3, Clermont. This is the headliner, the one that breaks people's brains when they learn about it. Clermont, Florida, has hills. Real hills. The kind where you look out your car window and think you accidentally crossed the state line into the Carolinas. The city benchmark elevation is 125 feet, but neighborhoods in the surrounding hills climb to 300, 350, even close to 400 feet above sea level. Sugarloaf Mountain, just outside town, reaches 312 feet and is the highest point in peninsular Florida. The 5th, 6th, and 7th highest points in the entire state are also within a few miles of Clermont. This is not a typo, and nobody is exaggerating. RiskFactor.com rates Clermont a 1 out of 10 for flood risk, the lowest possible score in the state of Florida. The secret is the Lake Wales Ridge. Clermont sits on ancient sand dunes deposited roughly 650,000 to 2 million years ago, when the surrounding flatlands were submerged under a shallow sea and the ridge stood as a chain of islands. The quartz sand is so white and so bright that the ridge line is actually visible from satellite imagery. And that sand is incredibly porous. When rain falls on Clermont, it doesn't pool on the surface. It drains straight through the sand and filters downhill into the Clermont chain of lakes. The 560,000-acre green swamp south of town acts as a massive natural reservoir, absorbing overflow that would otherwise have nowhere to go. Median home value here is around $426,000 to $450,000, which makes Clermont the priciest entry on this list. But it's also the closest to Orlando, about 25 miles west, which means actual job access, theme parks for the kids, and an airport that flies more than just turboprops. For families and remote workers, that proximity to a major metro without the flood exposure is the entire selling proposition. The city calls itself the gem of the hills and choice of champions the latter because the hilly terrain attracts triathletes and cyclists who train on the elevation changes. The Florida Citrus Tower, built in 1956, was originally designed so visitors could stand at the top and see orange groves stretching in every direction. The groves are mostly gone now, replaced by subdivisions, but the rolling landscape remains. The hills are steep enough that locals genuinely downshift driving through residential streets, which is a sentence that sounds fake until you visit. One important caveat. Despite Clermont's reputation as a flood-free paradise, low-lying parcels near the chain of lakes still carry parcel-specific flood risk. Insurers have cautioned that the choice of hills marketing narrative can create false security. Buy on the ridge, not in the lakefront swale, and get an elevation certificate before you close. They cost $300 to $600 from a licensed surveyor, and they're the single most important document in any Florida real estate transaction. Number 2. Crestview. The name literally tells you what's going on here, Crest. View. This town was named because it sits on the crest of a long woodland ridge between the Yellow and Shoal rivers in the Florida Panhandle. The Choctaw and Creek peoples used this high ground for generations, specifically because they understood that elevation meant safety from flooding. They didn't need FEMA maps. They had common sense and centuries of observation. Crestview sits at about 235 feet above sea level, making it one of the highest incorporated cities in the state, and it receives roughly 65 inches of rain annually, which puts it among the wettest cities in Florida. That sounds like a contradiction until you understand the geology. The ridge drains rainfall downhill so efficiently that the town itself stays dry while the water feeds the rivers in the valleys below. The rain falls on Crestview, and Crestview politely sends it somewhere else. The population hit 27,134 in the 2020 census, up 29% from 2010. This place is growing fast, largely because of the military. Eglin Air Force Base, Duke Field, and Hurlburt Field are all nearby, pumping steady employment and housing demand into the local economy. Median home value sits around $295,000 to $300,000. The growth has brought new construction, new retail, and the kinds of chain restaurants that signal a town is transitioning from small to mid-sized. Whether that's progress or decline depends entirely on how you feel about Olive Garden. FEMA classifies most of Crestview as Zone X. The flood-prone AE and VE designations only appear near the river, corridors and drainage channels at the base of the ridge. If you stay up on the crest, where the town's name literally tells you to be, you're in minimal flood territory. The honest downside of Crestview is wind. Hurricane Michael in 2018 proved that elevation protects you from flooding but does nothing for wind. Michael hit the Panhandle coast as a Category 5 and was still packing ferocious winds when it reached inland towns. Mariana, about 70 miles northeast of Crestview, lost over 60% of its utility poles. Homes and vehicles were crushed by falling trees. The damage was catastrophic, but it was all wind damage, not flood. If your primary fear is water in your house, Crestview is among the safest bets in the state. If your primary fear is a live oak coming through your roof at 130 miles per hour, the calculus is different. Number 1, Lake Wales. Sitting at the absolute heart of the Lake Wales Ridge at 128 feet above sea level, this is the town the entire ridge system is named after. And just outside the city limits, Iron Mountain rises to 295 feet, one of the highest points in peninsular Florida. The soil on Iron Mountain is red-brown from hematite-rich citronelle formation deposits that oxidize when exposed to air. Red dirt in Florida. Most people don't believe it until they see it. The ridge here has been above sea level for millions of years while the rest of the peninsula was submerged, which means the ecosystems on the Lake Wales Ridge are some of the oldest and most unique in North America. The scrublands contain endemic plant species found literally nowhere else on Earth. Biologists treat this ridge the way archaeologists treat undisturbed dig sites, with reverence and very careful footsteps. On top of Iron Mountain sits Bok Tower Gardens, established in 1929 by Pulitzer Prize-winning editor Edward W. Bok. The centerpiece is a 205-foot singing tower built from coquina stone and Georgia marble, housing a 60-bell carillon that plays daily concerts overlooking the surrounding ridge and lakes. The landscape was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, Jr., son of the man who designed Central Park. President Calvin Coolidge attended the dedication ceremony. This is not your typical Florida attraction. This is the kind of place that makes you stand still for a minute and wonder why you didn't know about it sooner. Lake Wales has a population of about 16,361 and a median home value around $242,000. That's nearly $170,000 below the state median. You're getting ridge elevation, minimal flood risk, historic architecture, a world-class botanical garden, and red dirt that looks like it belongs in Georgia, all for the price of a one-bedroom condo in Tampa. The town sits roughly equidistant between Tampa and Orlando, about an hour's drive to each. Access to two major metros without the flood risk, the congestion, or the insurance premiums that come with living in either one. The FEMA flood maps confirm what the geology already tells you. The ridge parcels are Zone X. The lakefront parcels carry higher risk. Buy accordingly. One more thing before you go. No Florida town is completely flood-proof. Every single town on this list has experienced some form of water event, whether it's riverine flooding, flash floods from extreme rainfall, or localized drainage failures. The ridge towns are dramatically safer than the coast, but they are not invincible. Mount Dora, a ridge town in Lake County that could easily have made this list, experienced a severe flash flood during a 1,000-year rain event in late 2025 that damaged homes and infrastructure despite its elevated position. One house nearly collapsed from runoff alone. Elevation reduces risk. It does not eliminate it. Always pull the parcel-specific FEMA flood map. Always get an elevation certificate. And seriously consider buying flood insurance even in Zone X, because at $400 to $700 a year in these towns, it's some of the cheapest peace of mind in America. If you made it to the end of this one, you're officially more informed about Florida geology than 99% of the realtors working in the state right now. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this every week. I'll see you in the next one.